hear something? Of course you did. I heard it too. That was the sound of the echoing cuckoo clock calling us back to Kids Book Read Aloud, S.C. Crovo, Magic of Nicholas. Welcome back. S.C. Crovo here. I'm the author and the writer, and I write about those magical families of Nicholas. Now, last week was our first week, and we introduced those magical families of Nicholas and told you all about the gift that they came to deliver. That's right, the gift of the wish. Last week, we also met somebody else, and that little somebody was Dolly. Now, Dolly was my kid's wish that came true, but Dolly's also going to take on a very important role because Dolly is the keeper of the key. Thank you, Dolly. Now, this is kind of an ordinary looking key, maybe a little older looking, but it's nothing at all like the keys of the Nicholas, because every single Nicholas has a golden key with all kind of swirls and curls on it, and it's all etched. And it's extremely important because their key connects them to their magic. Now, we're going to learn more about the magic of the Nicholas key because this week, our second show is really important and very exciting because we're going to read the first chapter of Masters of Nicholas and Target Earth. And this will be our first chapter this week, and each week we're going to read another chapter. So here's our book. Let's take our special book cover, which has an image of something that looks like a tree. And you're going to hear about a very magical tree in this story. So let's just slip our book into our book cover and let's begin. Are you ready? For Masters of Nicholas and Target Earth, Chapter 1, First Strike. 5 strikes pierced the blackness of the universe. They streaked through the silence of space in parallel formation, like blue lightning. Moving at speeds beyond capture of the human eye, they suddenly split apart and moved in different directions. Their targets would soon be reached with unerring accuracy. The northern region of the earth was dark. The blue flash sliced through the atmosphere and struck deep within a wintry forest surrounded by low mountains. As if guided by a sculptor's hand, the blazing blue light molded the landscape. A village, complete with stone cottages of assorted sizes, took shape around a hollow circle of stones. The blue light swept over each completed cottage, then retracted. It settled into the center of the stone circle and transformed itself into a blue flame. Master Nohab Nicholas opened his eyes slowly and looked around. He sat safely inside the largest of the cottages and rested comfortably on his simple wooden throne. He was still groggy from the journey, but content to see that all seemed to have arrived in order. The Yule Seer, with an image of the earth across the face of its orb, turned slowly in its golden base. He raised his hand toward his chest and grasped the item that hung from the golden chain around his neck. The key. Master Nohab Nicholas smiled sleepily and tightened his grip around the golden key that hung from his neck. His fingers followed the familiar swirled and engraved lines. All seems to be in place. There will be much to do in the morning. Keeping his hand firmly around his key, he fell back into a contented sleep. "How can this be?" a voice called out. The sun had just reached over the tops of the mountains and cast the first rays of life and light over the newly formed village. The inhabitants of the cottages had gathered around the blue flame and stood waiting for Master Nohab Nicholas to appear. The master did not leave them waiting long. The door to his cottage opened, and he stood before the gathering of questioning eyes, dressed in a red robe, tethered at the waist by a golden rope. His warm brown eyes were undisturbed by the scene of confusion. His long brown curled hair and equally long brown curled beard peeked out from beneath his red hood. "I know you have many questions." The dozens gathered began shouting at once, but the master raised his hand for silence. "Know that all has gone as planned. This new world is strange, but we are not strangers to each other. There will be much to do and to learn in the days ahead." "But we have lost our memory," a young woman shouted out. The rest of the group nodded in agreement. "It's as if we have no past." The masters thought it best. Master Nohab lowered his arms flatly for calm. "Memories before this moment will not serve us. We have all that we need here." He paused and he pointed his finger toward the ground where he stood. "You will all come to know the quest before you. We are all Nicholases, and the Nicholas magic is within each of us and in our keys." Some of the Nicholases nodded, but some were still uncertain. It was true that each Nicholas stood with a golden key from a golden chain. Brown curled hair in varying lengths framed their kind brown eyes. They looked as any other inhabitant on their new planet, but they possessed a special gift. "The blue flame will keep us warm and fuel our magic," Master Nohab continued. "Do you remember, Master Nohab?" a Nicholas asked. "Do you remember our past?" "I remember that which must be remembered, and I can say no more." The master averted his eyes. He did not wish to deceive, but he was bound by the rules of his position as master. "Come, there is something I wish to show you." He motioned for the group to follow. They marched quietly behind him and entered the large cottage of the master. They gathered inside and circled the Yule-seer. Calm settled as they gazed at the large, rotating globe. It was unfamiliar, yet they felt the importance of its presence. "The Yule-seer will answer our questions." Master Nohab swept his hands over the slowly moving orb, "and it will choose the few that will travel as givers." "Givers?" a chorus of voices called out. "We are the givers." The master pointed to himself and then spread his arms to encompass those in the room. "It is the reason why we were chosen to take this journey." The master spoke with increased excitement, and his eyes began to twinkle. "This world is new, 550 AD by their primitive calculations. The people of this world have much to learn and few skills, but they have great dreams. 12 men of Nicholas chosen by the Yule-seer will travel into this world. They will deliver the gift of the heart's desire to those whose hearts deemed worthy." The master sat down on his throne and slapped his knees. Why, we will guide the hearts of men to create, to invent, and to explore. That is our magic, and that will be our gift. What if we fail? A young man stepped forward and questioned. We will fail at times. The master rubbed his beard, and a small frown turned down his lips. For as much as there is light in the hearts of the people, there is darkness too. He took his key in hand and held it tightly. The heart can be treacherous, even for the wisest of magic. A young woman walked to the master's side and placed her hand softly on his sleeve. But will we ever go home again? I truly do not know, Master Nohab answered and looked directly into her eyes. This is our home now. He patted the hand that rested on his arm, and we are all part of the families of Nicholas. Nights fell and dawns broke, turning the days into months. The people of the village of Nicholas, as it was simply named, busied themselves with their new surroundings. A garden impervious to the cold and the snow was started. The seeds of the snow noble fir, carried by Master Nohab in his pocket, were also planted. The magnificent pines, when they grew, would reach heights of over 300 feet and offer much needed protection from the cold northern winds. A large barn was built to house the Yakut horses, who were most welcome and necessary for the journeys ahead. Come and see your new home, Lyra Nicholas gently guided the first Yakut horse toward the barn, while the rest of the horses waited patiently in the corral. She wrapped her scarf tighter around the brown curls of her head and shivered. I wish I could be as warm as you. The sweet-tempered creature walked without resistance. Covered in a dense coat of thick and woolly hair, the Yakut horses stood barely 5 feet high in height. Their stocky build and layered hair kept them resilient against the bitter temperatures. Once inside the barn, Lyra patted the horse, removed its reins, and allowed it to roam freely. Smiling, she turned to get another from the corral. Do you need some help? A young man asked, standing at the entrance to the barn. He was dressed in green plaid wool with heavy-duty brown boots on his feet, and a cap covered his short brown curls. What are you doing here, Timo? Lyra stopped at the entrance and placed her hands on her hips. I thought the men were supposed to be with the master for the choosing of the givers. Oh, I was there. He scuffed his shoe against the cold ground. The Yule-seer didn't pick me. Not this year. Lyra touched his sleeve with her mittened hand. Maybe next year. Besides, I need your help with the horses. You did offer. Timo nodded. One by one, they moved the horses into the barn. It didn't take long, and as Lyra watched the contented horses, Timo slipped his hand around her waist. Come on, Lyra, Timo gently pulled. Let's go get some hot chocolate. I'm not used to this cold air, and I could use something to warm me up. Join me? Lyra looked up into Timo's face and smiled. Together they walked arm in arm toward the entrance. But Lyra suddenly stopped. Wait! She spun around and faced the inside of the barn again. There's something I want to show you. Timo followed as Lyra weaved her way through the meandering horses. She continued past the low-stacked feed pile against the side walls of the barn. Finally, she reached the back of the barn, stopped, and pointed. You helped to build this barn, didn't you? Lyra asked. Timo bobbed his head up and down. Why do we need this door at the back of the barn if there is no door on the front? It's a rather large door, don't you think? And why does there need to be a lock? She pointed again at the oversized lock deeply inset into the door. Timo stepped closer to examine the strange door. He rubbed his brown beard, which was in the early stages of growth, and reached just past his chin. I've never noticed this door before either. The wooden and iron enforced door seemed to be much taller than was needed to bring horses through. It was almost 12 feet tall and mounted with heavy hinges. Timo reached his hand out and turned the iron handle. The handle didn't budge, and neither did the door. Preparations lasted for some time as the 12 chosen Nicholases readied for their first journey into their new world. The day of departure dawned cold but sunny. The horses stood packed and ready by the blue flame, with their riders mounted and waiting for instruction. The entire village gathered around them, not knowing what to expect. Master Nohab walked solemnly to each rider, spoke a few quiet words, and patted their horses in seeming approval. Riders, follow me, Master Nohab began, motioning and moving toward the barn. The rest of our village may join us as well. A caravan formed with Master Nohab at the lead. He moved swiftly through the entrance of the barn, with the riders behind him, followed by the rest of the village on foot. Look, Lyra whispered as she followed with Timo at her side. He's heading straight for the door in the back. The master must have placed it there. They reached the back of the barn, and Master Nohab lined the riders up one behind the other, facing the strange door. Wallen Nicholas, Master Nohab addressed the first rider, please dismount and place your key into the door. He continued, pointing his finger toward the door, and place it into the lock. Wallen Nicholas did not ask any questions. He slid from his horse, took his key in hand, stretched the golden chain as if it were made of rubber, and fit the key perfectly into the lock. He did not turn it, and instead waited for approval. The master nodded, and Wallen turned the key easily. Please get back on your horse. Wallen removed his key and jumped back onto his horse. Master Nohab lowered the door handle, now freed from its locked position, and opened the heavy, creaking door. There were piles of snow in front of the open door as a wisp of wind sent a shower of snowflakes inside the barn. Lyra looked and wondered, where could the riders possibly go? Had the master made a mistake? You understand what you must do, and your quest is clear? Master Nohab asked, staring up at the rider. Wallen nodded. When the Yuleseer chose a giver, the quest was made known to the giver only. Even the master did not know the quest, but could follow each giver's progress in the Yuleseer. Then, Master Nohab continued, direct your horse through and return when your task is complete. You can return through any locked door of your choosing or on foot through the mountain pass. Your key will know the way back home. Go through now. Wallen nudged the sides of his horse and moved through the open door. Everyone watched as he and his horse disappeared as they passed through the doorway. There were gasps as Master Nohab shut the door. Where did Wallen go? Shocked voices called out. To the destination determined by the Yuleseer and guided by his key, the master said. Whispers rustled throughout the barn like the sound of autumn leaves in the wind. He is quite safe, and I will be watching over him in the Yuleseer. I will watch over all of our Nicholas travelers. Arnto Nicholas, you're next. The remaining 11 riders faced the door and passed through just as the first. Timo strained his neck to watch the riders walk through. It must be magic, he thought. Once the riders stepped through the doorway, they were gone, leaving only the familiar piles of snow. The last rider passed through and Master Nohab closed the door behind him. He tested the handle on the closed door. It didn't move and was locked securely. Can my key do that? Lyra asked, holding up her key in her hand. Take me to another place by unlocking a door and walking through? Within reason, Master Nohab said, joining Lyra's side. The key is wise, but one must still be careful. Our thoughts, combined with the magic of our key, can take us to an unexpected place. Come, the master raised his cloaked arm like a staff to move them as a shepherd and guided his flock. Let us celebrate with a great feast. Our 12 Nicholases are the first of many who will deliver our gifts to the people of this planet. May our gifts be received and well used. When will they return? A voice called out. Master Nohab had reached the entrance to the barn but stopped. They will return, he said, facing the families of Nicholas, when each has delivered their one gift. And that ends chapter 1. Now, the image on this special book cover is very similar to a snow noble fir. Kind of a mystery, isn't it? The one gift could be anything. Anything that can be imagined. And what about the magical Nicholas keys? Wouldn't you like to have a Nicholas key? I would. I'd like to put a key in a lock, open the door, and wind up, maybe Hawaii on the beach. I'd like that. Now, Timo didn't get chosen this time, and he was obviously disappointed. But when we read chapter 2 next week from Masters of Nicholas and Target Earth, he may have his chance. And chapter 2 is called, gives you a little hint, Timo's Turn. And it begins like this. Over 20 years passed, which was only a short time for the long-lived Nicholases. Once more, the selection of the givers arrived, and the Yuleseer made its selection of the 12. Finally, Timo became one of the chosen. Now, that may be a little bit of a giveaway about chapter 2, but you're going to be able to experience what it's like for a Nicholas to deliver the one gift. It's very exciting. Now, I hope you're enjoying Kids Book Read Aloud, S.C. Crovo, Magic of Nicholas. If you are, please leave me a thumbs up below. And also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so that way you never ever miss a show. And also, let me just do a quick reminder here. Don't forget that both Masters of Nicholas and Target Earth and Benjamin Nicholas and the Golden Key are both available now on Amazon. And another thing, make sure you go to my website at scrovo.com and join the Magical Nicholas Short Story Club and more. It's free to join, and you'll have free Nicholas stories delivered right to your email. Thanks for reading with me today, and until next time, when the echoing cuckoo clock calls, and you'll know it's time for Kids Book Read Aloud, S.C. Crovo, Magic of Nicholas. Until then, make a wish, and have a magical week. I'll see you then.